from having my circulation cut off my face. And my other one was in the wash, and then I couldn't find, like, it wasn't dry enough, and I didn't want to put a wet mask on my face. Yes, it's nice pencils.
Yeah, I forgot to my walker again. I'm mad.
So guys, our homework that we're getting today will be due Friday, because obviously I'm not seeing you guys tomorrow, so just know that, heads up on that you have a couple days for that. Don't forget about it though either. So this Friday we do have school. Oh, it's not the 15th, sorry. 14th. Friday we do have school. Next week Friday is a virtual Friday, but this week Friday is a normal via school. So technically the homework will be due Friday. So the warm-up's asking you guys to solve by substitution, what we just did yesterday. So take a minute to do that. Hopefully you guys are pretty good at that by now. I'll give you guys a minute or two. In this one, we have our y equaling 5 minus 2x. We have to put that in place of y here, so we're going to substitute that in place of our y. When we do that, notice there's like a negative 1 here in front of the y, so you're going to have to distribute on this one. So if you made a mistake, it's totally possible that you missed that part of it. So it's x minus, well, minus the parentheses, I'll just do it that way. X minus parentheses 5 minus 2x, and that equals 9. So we're going to distribute this negative 1 into those terms. So minus 5, and then it becomes plus 2x. Now, I don't know, anytime I was a student and I got a decimal, I didn't get angry at my teacher. I just thought I was doing something wrong. I know, it makes you angry. So we're going to bring these two together. Now, this one I already can tell it's going to be a decimal. So just knowing that going into it and just being aware of that. Obviously not ideal, but we have calculators, so we can use those. So I get 3x equals 14. I divide by 3. And I get 14 over 3. Now, to be honest, if you leave it as 14 over 3 and are comfortable using fractions in your calculator, you'll get a little more exact of an answer. Because this is like 4.6 repeating, so essentially 4.7. So when I go to put that back in, I would highly suggest, so what I do when I do this, I actually leave this value like in my calculator and use it, or I leave it as a fraction. Either way is going to give you a little more accurate of an answer. So, oops, 2 times 4.7. Actually, again, 14 over 3 is a little bit better if I write it that way. So I get my y to be a negative 4.3 repeating. If you rounded, it might have changed your answer a little bit. Like 4.4 you might have gotten had you rounded. Or 4.2 if you rounded a little bit incorrectly. So just so you guys know, not always, our answers won't always work out to be nice whole number answers. I do try to avoid those, especially if they're ones like this, like the repeating decimal. But like there's a half or something, I don't quite feel as bad because the 0.5 isn't as bad to work with. So just a heads up on that, know that every once in a while there might be an answer that's not a whole number. Don't think I'm trying to pick on you, just trying to give you some dose of reality. So, what we're going to talk about, so we've talked about two different types so far. So we did graphing, we did substitution. Today we're going to do what we call elimination. If you're someone who uses other resources online, they might call it linear combination. Some textbooks call it that. So that's another name for it, is linear combinations. Basically, we're going to be putting the equations together and trying to get some nitpicks. Thank you so much. I'm sorry to have my face being sucked off or sucked to my head. Oh, that's much better. Thank you. Yeah, so Mookie chewed this thing, and so I just tied it thinking it was long enough still, and it's not. It's like, so I need to add some more elastic. Okay, thank you. And breathe again. So we're going to learn this new method. Now the word elimination, hopefully you think about the fact that makes it sound like we're getting rid of something. There used to be this horrible TV show, it was called Eliminate. So talking about old movies and old TV shows. This show was called Eliminate. So it was like a dating show where you were dating like a bunch of different people and then you'd like say, I'm gonna eliminate you. Do you remember that show? It was a horrible TV show. I think it was on like when I was like in college. So one of our friends actually was on it once and he was at like Summerfest and he got to like tell these girls to go to, like away one at a time until he picked the final one. But so one time they were at Summerfest in Milwaukee and he was on it. So it was a horrible TV show. They always ended up in like a hot tub or something. It was really gross and slimy. But so anyhow, but when I first started teaching, like that show was like kind of like cool because it was just like it was out. So my students, like they always eliminate made sense to them. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna try to eliminate a variable here. We're gonna try to get rid of one. And we're gonna be able to do that. We don't have to like isolate a variable like we did last time. So I think, like I said, you're gonna like this one a little bit better for that reason. So we always start with kind of an easy one, and so this one's kind of considered a little bit easier than some of the other ones we'll do. So the first couple of steps are gonna seem unnecessary here, but they're gonna be necessary as we move on with this. So we want the equations lined up. So if you look at this, kind of like the like terms are lined up. So the x's are in a column, the y's are in the column, the numbers without a variable are in a column. So that's what we want in our first step. To be honest, this is probably going to be the case for most of the problems we do, but I just want you guys to be aware of it if you were trying to do this with a different type of problem. So the equations need to be lined up. And I'll show you guys one example where they're not. So they're going to kind of look like this. So obviously I'm just picking random like letters to go with it. So this one's nice because it's all lined up already for us. If they're not lined up, so similar to like our warm-up question is an example of one that's not lined up, like the equal signs need to be lined up, we'd have to rearrange the warm-up question. So the warm-up I probably would have done as substitution, like we did. So what we want to have happen, this is the step that's going to make these problems a little bit trickier, and we won't have to deal with them much today, is that we want to have, so we want either so I either want the x values to have the same number in front of them, just the opposite sign, or the y values to have the same number in front of it with the opposite sign. So I'm using A and B as an example, but obviously we have numbers that we're going to work with. So that's what I want them to look like. All right, so in this problem we have that. If you guys look, we have 4x and a negative 4x. We have the x's that I'm talking about. Now the y's aren't, and that's okay. We have 8y and 2y, so those aren't the same number, opposite signs. But the x's have what we want. So this is what we're looking for in step 2. So this one's already kind of good to go. Now tomorrow, or not tomorrow, Friday, we'll see some that we have to do a little bit more work to do in order to get that to happen. So that looks good. So what we're going to get to do now is we're going to get to add or subtract these equations to make something cancel. So we're going to either add or subtract the equations. Typically I like just adding, and I'll show you guys that in a little bit. So we're going to add or subtract the equations to eliminate a variable. So if I added these equations together the way they are, what would happen if I added those x's together? They'd cancel out. 4x and a negative 4x would cancel. So what we just did was we got rid of the x's in these two problems with one step. So we have to, if we added those, we have to add the rest of it. So 8y and 2y, we get 10y, right? And 20 minus 30 would be negative 10. So what we just did is we got this equation down to only one variable and only like a one-step equation. So we were able to eliminate something and get it a lot simpler very, very quickly. Do we know how to solve for y now? Yeah, pretty straightforward, not too complicated at this point. We're going to solve our new equation for y. So we're going to solve this new equation. So we're going to get that y alone. So it's being multiplied by 10. So I'm going to divide by 10. So y ends up being negative 1. So with really just like 2 steps, we were able to solve for y. So like I said, this usually ends up being kind of students like more favorite type because they're like, wow, that was really easy. Now the reason why I didn't show you this yesterday is because it doesn't work for every equation. If they're not lined up nicely, or if something doesn't cancel nicely, these are a little more complicated. So a problem like this works pretty nicely. Now I have one variable, I still need to go back and find the other one, so I will have to do some substitution and go find that other variable. So that's our last step. So we have to substitute that value back into one of the original equations to find the other variable. So we're going to substitute that -1 back in to find that other variable. Now when I do that, I have to substitute it back into one of the original problems. If I substitute it back into this 10y one, there's nowhere to put the, like, I don't get anything out of that. So I have to put it back into one of the top equations. And if you look, I probably would choose the very top one because it has all positive numbers. I just would tend to lean towards one that has positive numbers versus negative. So I'm going to put it back into this one. And so I'm going to take that y and substitute that in. So this is probably the most time-consuming part, or maybe annoying part of this. So we get 4x minus 8 equals 20. Move this 8 over. So we just found out our x is 7. So we found our x and we found our y. And you don't have to be sold, and you don't really have to choose a favorite if you're like, hey, I don't know if I like any of these, that's okay. Or maybe you're like, they're all fine, whatever, what's the difference? It's just that I think that this way seems like kind of like a cool trick that it just gets rid of that right away. So let's do one more together here, and then we're gonna, we'll do a Kahoot. We haven't done a Kahoot for a little while, but, so let's do one more together. So let's look at example 2. So is everything lined up? Yeah, x's are in a line, y's are in a line, the equal sign's in a line. I guess that's really important as well. And then the numbers without a variable are in a line. Does anything cancel the way it is? Is there opposites? We have opposite for the variable. What opposite do we have? Which variable are opposites? The negative y and positive y is like a -1y and positive 1y. So those are opposites of each other. So these would cancel if I added them. A positive 1 and negative 1 would cancel. So the y's go away in this case. And that's okay. Don't think the x's always have to go away. Those are those opposites we're looking for. Now we're ready to add the other parts. If we add that part, we have to add the other ones as well. And 2x and 4x is 6x. 2 and 10 is 12. So again, I got us down to a one-step equation really fast. So now I'm ready to solve this. So I was supposed to multiply. I'm going to divide instead. So we're going to divide by 2. Or divide by 6 to get 2, sorry. Math pulled away my oxygen out of my brain. Alright, so x is 2. So now between the two equations, I think The second equation is easier to use. So I just can kind of choose which one I want to use. If you didn't care and you put it back into the top one, it's fine. But I'm going to put it back into the second equation because there's no negatives. Again, I think negatives and positives are probably one of the things that students make the most mistakes on. So I try to avoid those. Maybe I should make you do more of them, but I figure there's enough already that we can just use them when they come up. So 4 times 2 is 8. And then I just subtract that 8 to find out y actually ends up being 2 as well. Now you might look at that next problem and notice there's something kind of weird about that, and we'll talk about that one in a few minutes. So don't let the next problem scare you yet. We'll talk about that after our Kahoot break. Any questions?
Are we gonna do a fun?
Well, we're gonna do a math Kahoot, but then we can choose a fun Kahoot after that, okay? Because this math Kahoot doesn't have any fun questions in it. The questions that were in it were Halloween questions, so I deleted them because I realized, like, I must have taught this sometime around Halloween at one point.